Today's video is going to be all about my current 5-star reads out of all the books I've read. I thought it'd be fun to kind of look at all of the books I rated 5 stars over the years and kind of reflect on all the good books that I've read. I think I'm going to go through them in order-ish of like when I read them. I really think I want to go through the beginning books a little quicker because I think as I read more books, my reading taste and the way I rate books has changed. So I think some of these books might not be 5 stars to me anymore, but I will briefly go over them. So the first book, I read this in high school and I also mentioned it in my YA book video. I'm going to talk about a few books that I already talked about in my YA video because that's when the time of my life when I started reading and I really loved a lot of the books I was reading. So the first was The Fault in Our Stars, a classic. I did give this 5 stars, and I did mention how I wanted to reread it and see if I still like it, if I would still rate it 5 stars. So I definitely want to do a little reading vlog of that. Another book I mentioned and that I loved back then and rated 5 stars was Divergent. I feel like this is still 5 stars now because I just love this story so much. I love the dystopian world and I love the movie, which I know is different from the book, but still. I just love this world so much. So I also feel like this still might be 5 stars, but I don't know. Because like, you know, when you read a book and you're like, I love it so much and you just give it a 5 star without reading books that aren't that good. I feel like once you experience reading books that aren't that good and you're able to rate them low, then when you rate a book a higher rating, it has more meaning to it. Does that make sense? The next book that I rated 5 stars was The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. This is a book that I loved and I was so obsessed with when the movie came out, and I loved this first book. It's a really long book. I can't believe I ever read this long book. I don't know if this would still be 5 stars. This is one I'm a little iffy about. But once again, another dystopian setting that I really liked. And then, this was still in high school. This was the first time I ever read the Harry Potter book, or at least the first book. I watched the movies when I was younger, but I wasn't a huge fan of Harry Potter, but my brother did have a copy of this. At this time, I was reading all those dystopian books, and I was like, let me read like a classic book that everyone likes. So I picked up Harry Potter and I gave it 5 stars because I loved it so much. And I remember thinking like I couldn't believe it took me so long to read this book, because I remember when everyone was reading it when I was in elementary and middle school, and it never interested me like to actually read all the books. I think it's because I saw that the last books were like, most of the books are very long, and I was like, I'm not reading all that, I'll just watch the movie. But I felt like I had to check it out and I gave this 5 stars. I feel like this would still be 5 stars now because once again, this world is so amazing. Alright, so now we're coming to the books that I started reading last year when I got back into reading after kind of a long hiatus of reading. And the first book that I read coming back to reading was actually Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but I remember this was the second book I read, and that is Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansala. I love this book so much. This is considered a cozy mystery. I've never read a genre like this before prior to reading this book, and I love the mystery of it, but it literally was cozy. Like, cozy mystery was such a good name for like a way to describe this book. I also feel like it was very relatable because the main character is Filipina and it shows like her whole family, and it talks so much about food, and I swear every time I read this book I would get so hungry, and it was just so funny. It was like a cozy mystery, but it was funny and it was just perfect. I just feel like I loved reading a character that I could relate to because I'd never seen a Filipino in any of the books I've read before this growing up. So to see this was so cool, and I feel like that's also why I gave it such a high rating, because it was so new to me and I never read a book like this. And then I was going through my Goodreads account. This is when I started reading again. I remember I discovered Book Outlet and I saw this book on there and I knew this was on my to be read on Goodreads, so I just got it and I read it and I loved it, and that is The Defining Decade. This is a nonfiction book. I really don't read that much nonfiction, but when I do, it's very, what's the word? Specific. Like, it's like one I know I'm going to be interested in. So this was a book I've heard people talk about on like BookTube like a while ago, and I just felt like it would be nice to read because it's about why your 20s matter. And right now I'm 25. I read this when I was 23, 24. But I felt like it was a good time to read this book, and it honestly was the perfect time to read this book because everything they talked about in here was so relatable. You could see my tabs. This is when I first started tabbing, so my tabs are not like... The colors are cute, but like they're sticking out way too much to my liking now, but who cares? I tabbed it so much because there were so many meaningful things in here that I really liked. So I highly recommend this if you're in your 20s. It kind of like changes the way you think about your age and where you've come in life and everything. It talks about like love, I think career, money, all of those type of things. And it's not boring. It has really good stories. Highly recommend this if you're in your 20s. Up until this point, I definitely was just watching BookTube, and I saw these books on BookTube, but then I made my Bookstagram, and then that's when everything changed for me in terms of like book recommendations and choosing what books to pick up. And that's how I got into The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This was my introduction to Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is my introduction to Bookstagram books, Book Talk books, all of those popular books. And yes, I gave this 5 stars, but I feel like it's well deserved because this is a beautiful story. Even though there was a lot of sad parts, I loved the romance that ended up happening and the little mystery aspect and kind of plot twists that were going on, and it was just very beautiful. I love this book. Another tabbed early these tabs are a little better. Then, bouncing off of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, we have Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren, and I love this book so much. This is a book I feel like I might not rate 5 stars still if I were to reread this because of what happens towards the end, like what's revealed towards the end, because this is a second chance romance. So obviously towards the end it's revealed why they didn't work out the first time, and I feel like now I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't be okay with it. I mean, when I read it the first time I was like, that's not cool. That's not cool. But I feel like I definitely overlooked it because I loved the rest of the book. But now, like I said, that I've read a lot more books, I think a lot more about my ratings and what they mean when I rate a book. And I feel like I'm able to think more critically and reflect on how I feel about these books. So I feel like this would be more of a 4.5 star rating nowadays. But I still love this book so much. I love Elliot so much. Elliot and Macy. Honestly, I love Elliot and Macy. I love the setting, and I love that they're both book lovers, and they were just so sweet. And then I got a Kindle. I love how I remember this timeline so specifically in my mind. So at this point, I got a Kindle last summer when it was on sale, and I got the free trial of Kindle Unlimited, and so I was just exploring different books to read on Kindle Unlimited, and I had heard of some people talking about this book, The Infinity Between Us by N.S. Perkins, so I read it on there, and I read it in one day. I was obsessed. I just got the physical copy a few months ago because I really want to reread it and have the physical copy of this book, but I loved it so much. This was, like, it reminded me so much of Love and Other Words, but this was, like, the better ending, reveal, whatever. And I love N.S. Perkins so much. I've read all of her other books. I want to describe this one because I don't know if many people have read this one. So this one is about Violet and Will, and they grew up in a beach house in Maine with their 2 families, and their 2 families are like really close friends. And then, you know, eventually as they get older, high school age, they start dating, right? Something happens which makes them stop talking for years. But then they have to face each other when they come back when the beach house needs to be sold for some reason. So Will and Violet, you know, get there. They kind of don't want to stay. I think it's Violet who doesn't want to stay there with Will, but Will kind of convinces her, like, come on, like, we gotta fix up the house and this and that. And everything that happens is just so sweet. So, like, yes, it reminds me of Love and Other Words, but it also reminds me of The Summer I Turned Pretty because of the beach house setting and growing up together over all those summers. So I highly recommend this book if you like Love and Other Words or The Summer I Turned Pretty. And I've heard people compare this to Every Summer After, which I haven't read yet. But yes, this is a very cute summer second chance read. So with me being on Bookstagram, learning, you know, of course Colleen Hoover's gonna come up. But actually prior to this, I remember when I was in college, I actually had read a Colleen Hoover book, and it was November 9. And I didn't realize how big she was even back then. I feel like she was getting popular. And then when I realized she wrote November 9, I was like, oh wait, I've read her before. So I did end up reading It Ends With Us, and then, but actually I think I picked up this book first. I picked up Verity by her, and I actually gave this 5 stars because I really liked the craziness of it all, honestly. I think I would still give this 5 stars because it was just so crazy. Actually, I don't know, because of the romance part, I don't know if I'd still give it 5 stars, but I still think this was a really good, like, romantic suspense thriller, whatever you want to call it. I haven't read anything like it before prior to, so I really liked it. Maybe now that I've read a lot more romance and a lot more like mystery thriller books, I might read it differently. Then I read the sequel to Good Girl's Guide to Murder, which is Good Girl, Bad Blood, and we get to see Pip again, and she starts her podcast, I believe. I just felt so creeped out and scared, and I didn't think a YA book would be able to do that, but honestly, YA books can get pretty scary, like, or maybe I'm just like a scaredy cat, but I love scary movies. I just get scared very easily, but I enjoy it, you know? It's like I was scared, but I enjoyed it. I love these books because, like, for example, there's like pictures of like evidence and stuff, so it makes it feel so real and so creepy. I remember the ending of this book was so crazy, and I was like, I have no idea how Pip is going to move on from this, which we see in like the 3rd book, which is even crazier. But this was my favorite out of the series. I gave this 5 stars as well. So at this point of my reading career, I'm reading Shatter Me, and I get to the 4th book, which is Restore Me, and I loved it so much. I think I loved the first 4 books in the series more than the last 2, but this was definitely my favorite one out of all of them. I really liked Ignite Me. I know Ignite Me is the like favorite of many people, but this was actually my favorite out of all of them because of everything that happened, and that cliffhanger was so crazy. I love the Shatter Me series so much. I really want to do a reread of the series next year. Then we're like going into more Taylor Jenkins Reid's books. This is after Christmas. My boyfriend got me this book. It's One True Loves, and I read it. Oh, actually, I read this on New Year's Eve. I read this in one day. I started it during the morning and I finished it at night, and this one just had me crying the whole day, honestly. I've yet to watch the movie because I've heard mixed reviews about it, and I'm scared it's going to ruin the book for me, but I loved this book so much. So this is about Emma, and we see her with her high school sweetheart, Jessie. They both have their own jobs. So Emma is a writer and Jessie is a production assistant on nature documentaries. So they get to travel a lot together. They get married, but on their first wedding anniversary, Jessie is assigned to go to the Aleutian Islands, but then his helicopter goes missing over the Pacific Ocean, and Jessie's gone forever. So Emma has to deal with that and the grief of losing her husband. So it's like years later now. She's in her 30s. She quits her job. She goes back to her hometown, and she runs into an old friend named Sam, and she finds herself falling in love again. And they actually end up getting engaged. But then guess what happens? Jessie, her first love, is found alive. And he comes back. So now Emma actually has her husband back, but she also has a fiance, and now she needs to figure out what to do. Who is she going to be with? This book was so sad, and it was really pulling at my heartstrings a lot. And Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing, like, there was a lot of good quotes in here that I really loved. I was able to kind of guess who she was going to end up with, just thinking realistically, and it just made sense to me, and that's what ended up happening. But I really love the story, and I loved seeing the hardship that Emma had to figure out what to do. And obviously, I mean, I hope this would never happen in real life. It's really not realistic in actuality, but it is crazy to think of, like, the amount of, like, pain and heartache and love that happens in this story. So I loved it. This will always be 5 stars to me, I feel. Let me know if you watched the movie for this book and if I should watch it. I'm like actually scared it's gonna ruin the book for me, so that's why I haven't watched it. But when I heard that there was a movie, I was so excited, but I saw mixed reviews, so I'm like, I don't know if I want to watch it. That's what I did with Love and Gelato, because I saw mixed reviews for the Love and Gelato movie, and I loved the book, so I was like, I'm not gonna watch the movie because I don't want it to ruin the book for me. All right, we're almost at the end, guys. So next is this book that changed my life. So up until this point, The Infinity Between Us was my favorite book, and I hadn't really read a lot of romances. So I picked up this book because I heard this author was coming to Connecticut and talking about her newer book. And so I was at the library, I'm like, let me pick up, like, her other book and just, like, try it out. And I did not expect to even like this book at all. I was just going in blind, and I ended up loving it so much, and that is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. You don't understand how much I love this woman, and I love her writing. This book is the book of all books. I do have other favorite books, but this is, like, the ultimate favorite book I will ever have. Alexis and Daniel, I love them so much. So it's opposites attract. We have Alexis, who is from the city, she's a doctor, and then we have Daniel, who runs a bed and breakfast in a small town. They have such a cute meet cute, and we see them, how they progress through their little love, like, relationship, I guess, and seeing how them coming from two different backgrounds and places and life experiences affect their relationship, and I just love it so much. And I also love about Abby Jimenez's books is that, yes, there's romance, but then we get to see some character development between each character separately. So we get their stories together, but we also get stories about them separately, which I totally love. The next two books are by an author I was intimidated by because everyone loves her so much. I had 3 out of 4 of her books at this point, and I never read them because I was intimidated. I heard so many good things about them. I'm like, well, I don't know. I just kept pushing them off. But the summer came around, and I'm like, I feel like her books are summer books, so I'm just going to read them all throughout the summer and just get them all read. And that is Emily Henry. And the book that I rated 5 stars out of all of her books first was The People We Meet on Vacation. And I was surprised because I thought this was the book that people liked the least by Emily Henry. But this is the book I loved out of Beach Read, People Meet on Vacation, and Book Lovers. This book, I think it's because of the friends to lovers aspect of this and me wanting to know what happened in Croatia. Like, what the heck happened in Croatia to make y'all not talk? I feel like I read it at the perfect time because I read it during the summertime, and it talks about all of their vacations that they went on to together throughout the years, and I loved seeing how their friendship progressed over all this time, and knowing that Alex always loved Poppy from the start. Like, he would literally tell her, like, I love you, like, but as a friend, you know. So, like, reading this book, I loved them as characters and just wanting to see, like, what happened, and then everything wrapping up at the end was so cute. Just like Abby Jimenez, I like Emily Henry's writing because we also see a lot of character development other than the romance, and I feel like we got to see that here, mostly with Poppy. I loved Alex, but I feel like we didn't see much of, like, his character development and, like, reflection on him. I mean, at least I can remember, but I just remember Poppy and her life challenges that she was going through, and I loved seeing her character development with all of that. And then the other book was Happy Place. I love this book so much. And basically for the same reasons as The People We Meet on Vacation. I love the second chance romance in this book. But actually, the main reason why I love this book is because of the topic of, like, life after college, having friendships after college, and just being able to relate to that. I feel like I've talked about this book so many times that you should know that I love this book. And my last 5-star read was the latest book I rated 5 stars, and that is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This is, like, I feel like my top 5-star books is Powerless, Happy Place, and Part of Your World. These are my top 3 5-star books, or honestly just like my top favorite books. But yes, I talked about Powerless a lot as well in my wrap up and in my reading vlog, so you should know I also love this book so much, and I'm so excited for the second book to come out. So those are all the books I have rated 5 stars over the years. There are a few more that I, like, missed that I don't have anymore, so they were just, like, kind of old books that I had read. But these are mainly the ones I wanted to talk about today. I actually have a lot of 5-star reads, which I was surprised about when I pulled them all off my shelf. But like I said, there might be a few that might not be 5 stars anymore. So I would love to reread them and kind of explore that a little more. Let me know your current 5-star reads if you have any, or if you have any recommendations for me. Let me know any of your 5-star reads that you would recommend. Thank you guys for tuning in to today's video, and I'll see you guys next time.